And if anybody else is interested in sharing, go ahead. But if not, we can also I can give just some examples in general from my clients that I've worked with in the past and present to maybe just get some ideas flowing. Especially for those of you that were not here last week and you maybe didn't have a chance to implement these, also feel free to pop in if you have any questions or if you wanted us to go over in a little bit more detail anything that maybe piqued your interest or that you want to try at home. One thing that I had put on there last week that I have done with only a few of my clients, but I feel like it has been very helpful, is creating, I think I called it a visual menu, but I have three kids in the past that have used this, and usually this is for kids that struggle with restricted foods or have like a little bit more problems around feeding time. And maybe you have issues of, what you're serving for lunch or dinner every day. They're rejecting, or you're having to constantly make additional meals for them. Or other times too, I've used it for one client that was snacking a lot. So they wanted snacks constantly, and then wouldn't be hungry for dinner. So a lot of those issues, I always defer to feeding specialists, which luckily at CPTWC, we have really skilled speech therapists and feeding therapists that help us. But this can be kind of a support that if, the feeding therapist is on board and also recommends it and thinks it would be helpful, something you can do at home is have photos of what's available. And I'll give you two examples of two different families I've implemented it with. So one of my families was the kiddo that he had a pretty good diet, like would eat a variety of things, but struggled with like constant snacking and mostly also wanted like cookies or crackers or goldfish kind of as soon as he came home for therapy and would want to constantly snack on these until dinner. So what we implemented is we had paper with the pictures of the snacks that were available. So mom would put maybe like goldfish, but then also maybe some healthier options that she wanted him to eat instead, like maybe some fruits, or some nuts or some cheese and crackers, things like that. And then the menu would always be out and on the fridge. We put it on a magnet so that it was at his level. And essentially, it worked like a little bit of a cafe. So he would come home and he would look at his visual menu and he would almost always pick goldfish, but he would grab the goldfish and tear it off and give it to mom and be like, Mom, I want goldfish. And she would be like, oh, great job choosing. So she would take the goldfish picture and then give him his little portion of goldfish. And then if he was hungry again and wanted another snack, mom could direct him to the visual menu. So she would be like, okay, here's like what you have left. Which one of these do you want? And so what started to happen pretty naturally was at first, he had a hard time with it, or he would ask for the goldfish again, and mom would kind of show him like, hey, we already like did the goldfish. It's not on the menu anymore, but here's your options. And that helped in a lot of ways to kind of deflect the denied access from mom almost to the menu, right? So it kind of became like, oh man, I wish we could have more goldfish, but we already had it. It's not on the menu anymore. So it kind of helped him, instead of being mad at mom and constantly like fighting with mom, to kind of be redirected to that menu and looking at his other options. It also provided choices. So he kind of, instead of just hearing no, 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 it was like, well, here's what you can have. Do any of these look good to you? And at first he would choose maybe another one and not really eat that much of it if it wasn't as preferred, or eat a couple of them. And then after like a couple of weeks, he started to just pick one, and then he wouldn't even ask for more because he knew like, well, I don't really want fruit right now, or I don't want to go eat nuts and cheese. I already had my Cheerios and there's like nothing else for me on there that I want. So it really helped decrease the snacking. And then with my other client, we used it a little bit differently, but we did a food menu. This was a client that had a very restricted amount of safe foods. So they were in feeding therapy and they were working on expanding a little bit of the foods they would eat, but they only had like chicken nuggets, a certain type of chicken nuggets, and then a certain type of like potato fries that mom would make on the air fryer. And then they also really liked these Amy's meals. I don't know if you're familiar, but he liked this like specific types of Amy's meals. So there was like burritos, one was like a lasagna, And then one was like a rice and beans mixture. So what would happen, because this child had minimal communication repertoire at the time, was that mom would make one of these safe foods and it wasn't always the one that the child wanted, and it was leading to some really big like moments of emotional kind of meltdowns and frustration because he's so hungry but he can't tell mom what he wants. And mom's kind of trying to guess and she's wasting food because she made the chicken nuggets and made the potato chips and like those aren't working, so she was kind of trying to go through all his safe foods all the time. So instead, we just made a laminated picture of all the options. And every time there was a meal, we would just like show him and he would be pointing to the one he wanted at that time and we would make that one. So you can kind of use it in different ways, right? It can be like a visual menu for like, hey, I know what you want. I know what the problem is here, but I kind of want to minimize certain maybe behaviors, or it can be a helpful tool for communication of like, I have no idea what you want. I'm willing to give you any of these foods. I just don't know what you want right now. And then using it that way. So those are kind of some supports for home that could be helpful depending on what type of kiddo you have and like the type of eater that they are as well.
That's great. I like the menu and like kind of like deferring to like kind of setting those boundaries for a parent of you don't also have to continually repeat yourself. You can just be like, it's on the visual, like that's what it is, that's what's on the menu. It can kind of take like a lot of like added stress and negotiations away from it because you're like point blank, like this is what it is. Another great thing that's like super simple for kids is just like a first then visual. If you're trying to like get through a certain task, it helps with like bathroom routines or like getting through like evening or morning routines. First put on shoes, then we can go outside into the car. And kind of you can like pair it around situations where we really, really want to watch TV, kind of like referring back to the cleaning up, but there's a huge mess in the room. First, we need to clean up our space, then we can watch TV. And that can look as simple as like, I usually do like 2 columns and have like first, and then depending on the learner, I have a couple learners that are hyperlexic and crazy readers that are like super like regulating for them, that we can just as simple as just write it out what we need to do, then writing out what is going to happen if this gets completed. Or it can be varied up to as simple as like a quick little cleaning up visual. Like we like to use kind of like visuals that are within like the picture exchange system. So if anyone's familiar with PECs, they're just super simple, like kind of like stick figure people with clothes. They have like a full array of different tasks on what to do. I feel like Natalia is pulling up a visual. I saw her pull up a book.
I was
um,
just I was prepping our ABA visualized books. I know we touch on it near the end of the
yes,
slideshow.
yes. It's an amazing, amazing resource when we get to it, which has first then visuals and schedules. It has kind of everything we kind of reviewed today. So it's kind of like really cool, and it's super aesthetically pleasing. It's cute.
Here's an
Yes, first
example.
then, there it is. Can draw it out, write it out, make it laminated. We're really big on Velcro here, pulling Velcro visuals off and putting them on. Really,
It
really
also
helps.
has some generic ones you can pull from, but it shows you kind of like steps for
Mhm.
some hygiene tasks, getting dressed. And
Setting those
it
like, schedules and routines. It's great. So kind of some of our like final points. You guys aren't alone. We're here to help. Whatever like best suits your guys' lifestyle, what works best for your child and your family. These are just resources and tools and strategies to use and to add to your family's like toolbox, whether it's through more workshops, books, personalized consultation sessions. We're committed to providing you with this whatever support you need. So we're kind of like already diving into it. ABA visualized. We can share the link. I love this book and this manual specifically for parent training. I have so much as just brought the manual into parent trainings and have photocopied whatever topic we were talking about and just shared that with parents, but you can 100% buy it. I want to say it's on Amazon. such an amazing tool. It kind of touches on absolutely everything we covered today. Um, Unfortunately, we didn't make it. I wish I did make it, but
This
we
is what it
did
looks like.
share the wealth.
I feel like it's really great because there are some really great information in the intro. There's a little bit more writing, but I think this is a great tool for parents because it doesn't, for parents especially who maybe don't have the time to sit down and read a manual or like go to a workshop or spend a ton of time trying to learn these things. Look at how beautiful it is. It's visuals and kind of point form notes. So
Mhm.
it gives you a really quick, like, what is the tool? What does it mean? How do I use it? What's the best context? And then it's all visuals. So I think it can be really great if you feel like you don't have a lot of time to spend kind of like going to workshop or reading like a full kind of informational book. All of the pages are set up this way where you have like a really quick explanation of how to use it and then a visual explanation as well.
Yeah. And I think it also comes in Spanish too,
Yes,
and possibly even other languages as well.
it
Yes.
does come in a couple languages. I think Spanish and English are their most popular, but I know they also have a few others, at least one
Yeah.
other.
Yeah.
And then for those of you that have learners that use an AAC, so any kind of like additional augmentative communication system like PEX or an iPad or some kind of app, they also have a AAC guide
Mm-hmm.
with a very similar approach. So it's the exact same formatting, and I'll show you the pages in here as well, but it's for AAC. Um, so it gives you some like tools and different things that you can use specifically with these types of communication systems, also in a really quick format with a lot of visuals. And it gives you even like a tip, like it'll give you the, like that one specifically, I think was the wow and pause. And it tells you like tip, like this is the best time to use it, or try combining this with this other strategy. So it's super user friendly, super easy to kind of refer to and use with your kids at home.
And it's broken down. They have the index of whatever areas that you want to refer to, whether different like priming strategies of things that happen before or different consequence strategies, things that happen after a behavior. So it kind of covers all the bases and it's a beautiful manual. Love it. Okay. And we can share that. We'll share the link. If anyone has any other questions, we're happy to answer anything specific, child related, family related. Let us know. You can always message in the chat too. I've always got that open.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Hi. Thank you very much. So we have twins. So I often found myself in a situation that I have to resolve the conflict between them. Like like because they when they got into the fight, they were so kind of intense that I often found myself to be the role saying, "Hey, you are wrong," or "You need to apologize." But I just don't know, like thinking back, whether it's the right thing to do or like I should encourage them to be more kind of forgiving and considerate. But I'm just also wondering, since you're talking about this today, is there any kind of visual sign or helpers that can kind of help me dealing with that situation in a more calm and peaceful way?
My
Yes.
biggest suggestion is kind of having a visual of kind of the behaviors that you want to see. So different types of expectations and practice, if it helps with each individual child, so that in the moment you can always refer back in a more supportive, like stance so that you can say we've reviewed these strategies before, but my biggest thing is always like reviewing these skills and practicing these skills before we're like in the moment where it can be really emotional, and with siblings can be really tricky because things go out the window whenever you're competitive with a sibling. I get it. But really kind of the most important piece is to try to like be proactive, practice as much as you can prior to these activities happening, and then also reminding them right before the activity happens. So say, okay, I see that you two are both gonna go play a game. I know that sometimes this can result in being upset or feeling frustrated, or if you lost or you don't want to share, and kind of laying out expectations of things that you can do is like ask for more time. If you need help from me, always ask for help from mom or dad. And kind of just like being that like facilitator of things, of strategies they can use in the moment. Whether they're a reader or they're a visual learner, you can always have it like written out on like a board, or like written it down on a piece of paper, to kind of like have that reminder. But I always like to do like apply a like a contingency map for it, of like, here's our strategies of things that we would like to see to kind of promote those like those wins within those activities. But if we do see those behaviors, if there is like aggression, and if you are having to like break them apart, letting them know that those types of behaviors might result in like, hey, we need to kind of put a pause on this activity, work on regulating our body and calming our body, and maybe we can review some of our expectations before we can return. It's kind of like my suggestion with that.
I also have some visuals I can share. I don't know if Natalie maybe already has contact info. If not, if you want to share like an email, you got it. Okay, awesome. I can share some visuals that I have kind of already set up, and they are some antecedent, some consequent. So some of them show like, hey, these are our options for coping strategies. So it'll show like, hey, we can take deep breaths, we can listen to music, we can walk away, we can ask for a hug. And that's kind of like things that you can use both in the moment and before to remind them like, hey, when we're starting to get frustrated, when we're starting to see those precursor behaviors, sometimes parents especially are so in tune, I feel like, to their kids that they know like, oh, I know by the way that he just grabbed that we're getting mad. Or when you're noticing those things, it's like a time to kind of bring that visual in and support. And then I also have a visual for de-escalating. So it's something that you can start implementing like consistently at home anytime that either one of your twins get escalated. You can kind of follow the same routine for like, hey, this is how we're going to work on getting back to baseline. It's super simple. It can be adapted to. So if you're feeling like some of the steps don't work for you, or if your BCBA maybe is like recommending that we modify them a little bit, totally feel free to. But just to give you a bit of a preview, the steps on there are like stop. So the first step is kind of like stop whatever we're doing and wait for calm. Then step 2 is wait for calm. So just kind of let your child de-escalate on their own, or if they have coping strategies that help de-escalate, like maybe they have a comfort item or asking for a hug or taking some space. And then once we're calm, step 3 is choosing a coping strategy. So we're either going to practice deep breaths, talking about it, listening to music, whatever it is that helps them. And then step 4 is a debrief. So it's kind of like anytime we're having these big like eruptions of like, oh, we're having a fight or we're having a hard time with a game, going through like the calming process, practicing a coping strategy, and then just doing a quick check-in where we're essentially giving them the replacement behavior. So doing like, hey, like I saw that you guys were playing together, your brother took your piece and you got really mad and you hit him. So here's some options for what we can do next time. Like, which one do you think you want to do next time? So kind of just like giving them those things, and it might be something that takes a while. So it's not like, oh, I told him he can ask, and like the next time he immediately asked. But it's just something that you're kind of putting that into their repertoire as like, hey, like these are some other things you can do. And you might not see it right away, but that consistency of like, we're always going to come back and I'm always going to keep giving you these other options of things you can do. Eventually, we usually start to see that the kids start to get it. And sometimes with my kids, it begins as like we hit, and then we kind of were like, oh, can I have it back? So kind of like fighting that impulse control a little bit, but little by little, we can shape it to like, oh, I'm not going to hit. let me ask first, or like, okay, asking didn't work, let me go ask my mom for help, and kind of like working through those things.
I think also just something to add for yourself as a parent is that you have to recognize when you are at your limit and you need to tap out essentially and say, I need to take a break. And I think it's super important for our kids to see us practicing our own coping mechanisms, our own regulation techniques, and even putting language to it of like, oh, mommy's getting upset or daddy's getting upset, and we need to go take a break ourselves. Or I'm sorry, but right now I need my space. I see that you're having some troubles, but mommy is also having troubles, and she just needs to take a little break right now. And whether you leave, the room, obviously you want to make sure your kids are safe and things of that nature. But whether that's you take a break on the couch and like reinforce, like, sorry, mommy's off limits. She needs to take a break. She needs to calm down. Look, she's taking some deep breaths. Just kind of model some of those coping skills for the kids really helps for them to see that it's not just them that has, difficult times, but that, us as parents, we also, struggle with things when things don't go the way that we think they should go when kids are playing.
I've actually done that. Like the break, like even with the timer, we've used a timer for my own break. And then like I'll tell like my son, like, look, mommy needs some silence for the next 5 minutes. And I put a timer and like he stays silent, like or does his own thing for like at least 5 minutes. And then we use he was taught the boundary song, and I actually used it with him too. So like he uses it with to me, and I use it towards him as well. So that's both things have helped.
That's great. That's awesome.
I love the boundary song.
Yeah, me too. Okay. Well, we can always wrap up on that. Thanks everyone for sharing, and we will still share the resources that we kind of like just chatted about, and Natalie can even like share like some slides, loop us all together if we need to. Reach out if you have any other specific questions that you kind of want to just like spitball, need a soundboard, see if you want any suggestions or support from us. We're happy to help. But yeah, thanks for everyone for coming.